Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are stepping right behind the velvet rope.
Yeah, way behind it.
We are entering this world of incredibly high ceilings, damp cottages, and, friendships that feel a lot less like actual camaraderie and a whole lot more like hostage situations.
Right. It is a world where being one of us is basically the ultimate password, but also, as we're going to find out today, it is the ultimate weapon.
Exactly. So today we are talking about Elizabeth Day's psychological drama, One of Us. And I have to say, this book really messed with my head a little bit.
Oh, I totally get that.
Because it is a thriller, yes, but it is also this just incredibly uncomfortable dissection of the British upper class. The specific type of people who call dinner supper and they wear these moth-eaten jumpers that probably cost an absolute fortune.
And destroy lives with a perfectly polite smile.
Yes, exactly that.
It is basically a study in toxicity wrapped in cashmere. And at its heart, it is really about the relationship between two men, Martin Gilmore and Ben Fitzmaurice. And I think, if you listening have ever had a friend who made you feel incredibly lucky to just be in their orbit, but also sort of terrified of stepping out of line, this deep dive is really going to resonate with you.
Oh, absolutely. We are going to unpack all the dynamics of privilege, betrayal, and that really desperate, clawing need to belong. Because in this particular ecosystem, you are either sitting at the table or you are on the menu.
And usually the people on the menu are the exact ones who think they have finally earned a seat at that table.
Right. So let's set the scene here. Let's give a clear overview. What are we doing today?
We have got the full text of One of Us by Elizabeth Day as our source material, and our guide through this sort of hall of mirrors is Martin Gilmore.
Right, the outsider.
He is the guy who is constantly pressing his nose against the glass.
Yeah.
But he is not exactly what you would call a sympathetic underdog, is he? No, not at all. And that is what makes him so fascinating. Martin is this narrator who basically tells us right from the very start that he is not a good person. He actually describes his own personality as a hall of mirrors.
Which is such a striking image.
It really is. He is a man who has spent his entire life existing completely in the shadow of Ben Fitzmaurice. And so he shapes his personality to reflect whatever he thinks people want to see. Which, makes him an incredibly unreliable storyteller for us, but a really sharp observer of this world.
And then on the flip side, there is Ben.
The golden boy.
Yeah, the golden boy. He is wealthy. He is charismatic. He is this politician on the rise. He is basically everything Martin is not. But their friendship is not just about admiration. It is built on this really shaky foundation of unequal power, a massive covered-up crime, and a nickname that honestly makes my skin crawl.
Little Shadow.
Little Shadow.
I know. That nickname, Little Shadow, tells you absolutely everything you need to know about their dynamic before we even really get into the plot of the book.
Because it implies dependency.
Exactly. Dependency and a complete lack of substance. Because logically, a shadow literally cannot exist without the object that is casting it.
Right.
So the mission of this deep dive is to look at how this dynamic plays out. The story is told mostly through Martin, who's this resentful outsider. But we also get these crucial shifts in perspective to the women in Ben's life.
Right. We get Serena, who is his deeply insecure wife. We get Cosima, his rebellious daughter. And we get Fliss, his really tragic sister.
And that structural choice by the author is so important because Martin presents himself as the guy who is telling us the hard truths about the upper class. But by bringing in these women's perspectives, Day actually shows us who the protected class really is. It raises this whole theme of the reliable narrator versus the protected class. Like who actually gets to tell the truth and whose truth gets buried under just literal piles of money and influence.
It is such a brilliant setup. So let's go right back to the beginning. Let's look at the origin story. Martin Gilmore and the birth of the Little Shadow. We have to start at Burtonbury School.
Yeah, this is where the die is totally cast. Martin arrives as the scholarship kid. And the author writes this incredibly visceral scene of his arrival. Like, if you have ever felt out of place, you will feel this in your bones.
Oh, yeah. He has the wrong suitcase.
Right. It is too new. It's too stiff.
And he's wearing the wrong shoes.
Yes. He describes himself in that moment as feeling repellent and wrong. It is that instant, terrible high school nightmare of realizing you missed a memo that everyone else apparently memorized at birth.
It is almost cellular, that shame he feels. He realizes his very existence in this space is incorrect.
Precisely. He feels physically incorrect.
Yeah.
So he is being bullied. He is totally isolated. He is essentially walking around as prey in a school that feels like it was designed specifically for predators. And then right at his lowest moment, comes the savior moment.
Ben Fitzmaurice intervenes. The literal golden boy steps in.
He steps in when Martin is being tormented by the other boys. And this one action establishes their lifelong dynamic. Ben instantly becomes the benevolent god, and Martin becomes the grateful worshiper.
Because Ben invites him into the fold. But it is not an invitation of equals, is it?
No, not at a place like Burtonbury. It is more like an adoption or taking in a stray dog.
And that is exactly where the nickname comes from, Little Shadow, or LS for short. Ben and his friends, including this awful guy, Andrew Travis, who we will definitely talk about later, they start calling him this, and the really tragic part here is how Martin reacts to it initially.
Right, he actually takes it as a compliment at first.
It's so sad.
It is. He spins it in his head to mean something positive.
Yeah.
He thinks it means he's stealthy, He says he can slip through cracks like smoke.
Yeah.
He actually takes a lot of pride in being unobtrusive and blending in.
But then later, looking back as an adult, he realizes what it really meant.
Yeah. He realizes it signified his complete lack of substance in their eyes. Like I said earlier, a shadow has no form of its own. Martin only really exists in that social circle because of Ben.
Oof. That is just brutal when you lay it out like that. It is like he is haunting his own life. He is a ghost in his own story.
And because of that, Martin cultivates this extreme talent for compartmentalization. He actively hides his true nature. And specifically, he hides his sexuality to fit into Ben's world.
Right. He effectively neutralizes his own identity just to be the perfect accessory for Ben.
He becomes a completely blank canvas for Ben to project all of his own greatness onto. Martin suppresses his own desires, his own personality, everything, just to be the mirror that reflects Ben's magnificence back at him.
But there is a massive cost to that entry ticket. You don't get into that world for free, and that cost comes due at Cambridge.
Yes, the original sin of their relationship.
Let's talk about the Cambridge incident, because this is the glue that holds them together for decades. But it is incredibly toxic glue. It is the one thing that physically stops them from ever just being normal friends.
It is absolutely the defining moment of their youth. So they are at Cambridge. Ben gets incredibly drunk and decides to get behind the wheel of a car. Martin is in the back seat, and there's a young woman with him, Vicky Delane.
And Ben crashes the car.
He crashes it.
Yeah.
And Vicky is killed.
And this is where the major transaction happens, because the book makes it very clear that this is a transaction. It is not just two boys panicking in the dark. It is a calculated deal. Martin steps up and takes the blame.
He claims he was the one driving. He tells the police this whole story about how he swerved to avoid a fox in the road, which is this classic, almost cliche excuse.
And the police just buy it.
They buy it because Martin was the sober one. He hadn't been drinking like Ben because Martin always had to be the vigilant one, right? He was the shadow. He had to keep watch. So the police accept his story. It is ruled a tragic accident. Case closed.
But it is not just blind loyalty that makes Martin do this, is it? There is a financial element.
Oh, heavily. The Fitzmaurice family pays Martin. They basically give him hush money. But the fascinating thing is how differently Martin and the Fitzmaurices view this payment.
Right, because Martin sees it as a bond.
It's exactly. Martin believes this massive sacrifice, taking the blame for a fatal crash, buys him permanent entry into their family. He really thinks he has bought a lifetime premium membership to the Fitzmaurice Club. He is thinking, I saved the heir to the family dynasty, so now I am basically blood.
But the Fitzmaurices do not see it that way at all.
Not even slightly. To them, it is simply a service rendered. It is like paying a plumber to fix a massive leak in your house, except the leak was vehicular manslaughter.
Right. You cleaned up our mess. Here is your very large check. Transaction complete. Goodbye.
And that fundamental divergence in how they view that one event is the absolute source of all the resentment that poisons the rest of their lives. Martin thinks it is a blood oath. Ben thinks it is a receipt.
A blood oath versus a receipt. That is such a perfect way to put it. It sets up the entire power imbalance for the rest of the book. So let's fast forward to the present day, section 2 of our deep dive. The cracks in the facade. Because things have definitely not gone equally well for both of these men as they hit middle age.
No, the divergence is stark. Martin is now an art history lecturer. He teaches at the University of South Anglia.
Which he points out, with his typical Martin snobbery, is a very mediocre institution compared to Cambridge.
Oh, he is incredibly bitter about it.
Yeah.
He lives in this damp, depressing little cottage. He is largely alone. He doesn't have a partner. He just has his cat.
And we have to mention the cat's name.
Of course. The cat is named Maurice.
Short for Fitzmaurice.
Exactly. Even his pet is named after the man he's completely obsessed with. It is pathetic, honestly, but it is also deeply sad. It just shows that Martin literally has no life outside of this obsession. He is waking up every day and feeding a small, furry version of his oppressor.
I mean, that is a level of psychological tethering that is almost hard to comprehend. So Martin is living this very quiet, very resentful life, but then he gets into some trouble at work. And this inciting incident is so cringe-inducing, but it reveals so much about who Martin is now. He gets suspended for using the term Orientalism during a lecture.
Right. So he is teaching a class on the painter Manet, and he uses the term Orientalism to describe an artistic influence. Now, in the context of pure art history, that is a valid term describing the historical depiction of the East by Western artists. However, the social context of how he uses it matters. And a student in his class, Jacob Malik Edwards, calls him out on it. He accuses Martin of racism.
And Martin just completely spirals. He physically cannot handle being corrected by a student.
He absolutely refuses to apologize. He completely digs his heels in. And what is so interesting here is that Martin immediately views himself as a martyr. He thinks he is a victim of woke culture.
But the text is doing something really clever here.
It is. Because while Martin is acting like the aggrieved defender of academic freedom, the text shows us his internal monologue. And his internal monologue is incredibly snobbish, elitist, and just cruel.
Yeah, he is looking down on these students so much.
He calls them meaty-faced gym boys. He mocks the girls in their velour tracksuits. He essentially despises them simply for not being part of the elite Cambridge class he went to school with.
Which really highlights his fragility. He is so deeply insecure about his own status at this mediocre university that any challenge from a student feels like an existential attack on his intellect.
Exactly. So because of this blow-up, the university forces him to go to therapy. And this brings us to one of my favorite characters, Joanne Buster.
Oh, call me Joanne.
Yes, she is phenomenal.
She really is the human embodiment of a live, laugh, love sign. She wears these bright, clashing patterns. She is relentlessly optimistic. She uses phrases like self-love and safe space. And Martin, naturally, completely despises her.
He hates her. He finds her fatally tedious. But the author uses Joanne as this brilliant framing device for the narrative. Because through these mandatory therapy sessions on Joanne's presumably very uncomfortable IKEA sofa, we start to see Martin's carefully constructed mask slipping.
Because he thinks he is so much smarter than her.
He does. He constantly mocks her optimism in his head. But secretly, as the sessions go on, you realize he actually likes the simplicity of her worldview. He is drawn to her because she is everything he is not. She's uncomplicated. She doesn't have a hall of mirrors inside her. And at one point, she just asks him simply, "Why do you care so much what Ben thinks?"
And he is totally stumped. He cannot answer it. It is the one question that cuts right through all his intellectual armor. So while Martin is sitting there dissecting his miserable feelings, where is Ben in the present day?
Ben is ascending. Ben is literally flying high. He is now the energy secretary in the government, and he is actively positioning himself to run for prime minister. He is polished, he is incredibly charismatic, and he seems completely untouchable.
As Martin would say, he has successfully failed upwards his entire life.
Precisely. And in the midst of this political rise, Martin is invited back into the inner circle for what they call a kitchen supper.
Let's talk about the kitchen supper, because it is definitely not a casual potluck with friends.
Not at all. The kitchen supper is basically a weapon in itself in this social class. It is completely designed to look casual. They are eating in the literal kitchen. They are sitting on mismatched rustic chairs. They are wearing messy sweaters. But the wine they are pouring costs 200 pounds a bottle. And the food has been completely prepared by a hidden caterer or a private chef.
It is that very specific British upper-class flex. It is the aesthetic of saying, we are so incredibly wealthy and powerful that we don't even need to try to impress you.
Exactly. It is highly curated negligence. And this kitchen supper is where the massive betrayal happens. This is the real inciting incident for the rest of the thriller plot. Martin goes to this dinner thinking he is there because he and Ben are still best friends. He thinks he's still part of the family.
But then Ben takes him aside into a hallway and reveals something shocking.
Ben casually mentions that he used Martin's name in a recent conversation with a journalist from The Guardian.
Right. And we should frame why he did this. Ben's political team was facing accusations in the press of being monocultural. Basically, the optics were bad. They were seen as too white, too straight, too relentlessly privileged. So to prove his diversity credentials to the media, Ben told this journalist that his absolute best friend in the world is a gay man, meaning Martin.
Which is a massive, massive violation on multiple levels. First of all, Martin never explicitly came out to Ben.
Right. They had a sort of unspoken understanding, maybe, but Martin never sat him down and gave him permission to claim that identity.
And he certainly never gave him permission to blast it out in a national newspaper to score cheap political points.
It has essentially been using Martin's private identity as political capital. It is the political equivalent of saying, look, I can't be out of touch. I have a gay friend.
Exactly. Now, to be clear to our listeners, the book uses this scenario to critique the cynical PR machinations of elite power structures, regardless of political affiliation. We're just looking at how Ben specifically operates here as a character. It is the ultimate commodification of a human being.
It totally is.
Yet it perfectly mirrors the childhood bullying and the Cambridge car crash. Ben simply uses Martin whenever it's convenient for him. When Ben needed someone to take the blame for manslaughter to save his future, he used Martin. When Ben needs a quick diversity token to smooth over a minor PR blip on his way to number 10, he uses Martin.
Because Martin isn't an actual human being with agency to Ben. He is a utility. He is a tool in the shed.
And the really devastating part is how Ben delivers this news. He is totally dismissive. He says something like, "Oh, sorry, mate, didn't think it was a big deal. Hope you don't mind."
That casualness is the fatal blow.
It is. If Ben had done it with malice, or if they had a huge fight about it, maybe Martin could have processed it. But the sheer thoughtlessness of it, the realization that Ben didn't even consider Martin's feelings for a single second, that stings so much more.
That is the exact moment the little shadow snaps. That is when Martin shifts from being this pathetic, loyal dog to being a very dangerous enemy. He finally realizes he is not a person to Ben, he is just a prop.
So Martin decides, right then and there, to burn Ben's life to the ground.
But to do that, to take down a guy as powerful as Ben Fitzmaurice, he needs serious ammunition. He can't just go to the press and complain about his feelings.
No, he needs proof of something huge. And that ammunition ultimately lies with the women in Ben's life. Which brings us to section 3 of our deep dive, the women.
Let's talk about them, because the women in One of Us are some of the most complex characters in the whole story. They are simultaneously victims of this patriarchal upper-class system and also its primary enablers. They are trapped in the exact same toxic orbit as Martin.
Yeah, let's start with Serena, Ben's wife. She is fascinating.
Serena is this former it girl from the 90s. But now, in the present day, she is really struggling. She is battling menopause, she has severe anxiety, and most importantly, she feels completely invisible to her husband.
She is entirely obsessed with her fading beauty, because she has internalized this horrific idea that her only actual value to the world and to Ben lies in her physical appearance and her social grace.
Day writes these incredibly painful, detailed scenes of Serena retreating to this high-end wellness clinic in Europe, the Vertensee Clinic.
Right, and she goes there to literally starve herself, to try and regain some sense of control over her life.
It is horrific to read. She is sitting there chewing a single cracker 15 times before she's allowed to swallow it. It is framed as wellness and discipline, but it is really a discipline of complete self-erasure.
It perfectly highlights the immense pressure on women in this specific social sphere to just shrink themselves, to literally take up less space and metaphorically be less demanding.
But Serena does eventually act out. She rebels. She has an affair.
And not just with anyone. She has an affair with Andrew Jarvis.
Which is wild. Andrew Jarvis is Ben's oldest best friend. And physically, the book describes him as looking basically like a toad. He is not a romantic or attractive figure, so why Jarvis?
Because it is a calculated act of rebellion. It has nothing to do with physical attraction or love. Serena knows that Andrew Jarvis is Ben's primary financial backer. Jarvis holds the purse strings for Ben's entire political career.
Oh, I see.
So by sleeping with Jarvis, Serena is forcefully inserting herself into the male power dynamic that usually excludes her. It is her way of touching the money, touching the actual power source. She wants to feel relevant in a world that is telling her she is past her expiration date.
But we should be clear, Serena is not exactly a feminist hero in this story.
Oh, definitely not. She judges other women constantly and harshly.
Yeah, she is brutal. She fat shames women, she class shames them. She is the ultimate gatekeeper.
She is very much Eve, not Lilith, if we look at those archetypes. She aggressively upholds the exact patriarchy that is suppressing her because it is the only game she actually knows how to play. She genuinely believes that if she just follows the rules, stays thin, stays polite, and stays rich, she will be safe.
She is tragic, but she's completely complicit. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have Fliss, Ben's sister, the real tragedy of this entire book.
Fliss is the designated black sheep of the Fitzmaurice family. She is an addict, she's a wanderer, she is messy. But crucially, She is the only person in that entire house who is ever genuinely kind to Martin without wanting anything in return.
But the timeline of the story is interesting because the book actually begins with her funeral.
Right. Fliss is already dead when the main action starts.
The official family narrative, the PR spin, is that she died in Bali. They frame it as a tragic, accidental drowning, probably related to a drug relapse. They literally say, oh, typical Fliss. They completely dismiss the reality of her death, just like they dismissed her when she was alive.
But as Martin starts digging around, and through various flashbacks, we learn the horrific truth about Fliss. She wasn't just unwell or messy. Fliss was the victim of a severe crime.
She was raped.
Yes, years ago. She was vulnerable, she was highly intoxicated at a party, and someone took advantage of her.
And that someone was Andrew Jarvis, the money man.
Exactly, the same Andrew Jarvis. And honestly, the crime itself is terrible. But the aftermath, how the family handles it, is what destroys her.
Because she tried to tell them. She went to Ben, her own brother, and she told him what his best friend did to her.
And Ben and Serena completely gaslit her. They closed ranks. They told her she was an unreliable narrator of her own life. They claimed she was too unwell to remember things correctly. They protected Jarvis at all costs because Jarvis is the one funding their entire lifestyle. Jarvis pays for the political campaigns.
So Fliss was basically sacrificed on the altar of Ben's ambition.
Exactly. To keep the political machine running, they had to bury her truth.
That is just sickening. It makes you realize how utterly ruthless they are beneath the cashmere and the kitchen suppers. So her death in Bali, it wasn't an accidental drowning.
No, it wasn't. Martin discovers that she left a note for her friend Derek. She was completely sober when she died. She simply walked into the ocean because she literally could not fight the Fitzmaurice machine anymore. She realized that no matter how loud she screamed, her own family would always choose money, power, and Andrew Jarvis over her safety and her truth.
It is absolute crushing despair. She was suffocated by their privilege.
It is the dark heart of the novel.
And then we have the third woman who kind of bridges the gap between the family and Martin, Cosima, Ben and Serena's daughter.
Right, Cosima. Or Pineapple, as she insists on being called in her activist circles.
She is total Gen Z energy.
Very much so. She completely hates her parents. She hates their massive carbon footprint. She hates her dad's politics. She hates the whole Tipworth estate lifestyle.
She is heavily involved in this climate activist group called Oblivion Oil. The book shows her literally participating in protests where they throw orange paint at the British Museum, which is, of course, exactly where her parents happen to be attending a high society gala.
It is that very modern, very specific conflict, the child of extreme privilege who aggressively rebels against the exact privilege that is keeping her safe. But Cosima is dealing with her own massive betrayal.
Right, her boyfriend.
Her boyfriend, River, who is a fellow radical activist. It turns out he is actually an undercover cop.
Which shatters her reality.
No. It is a profound double betrayal. Her father constantly betrays the public trust on a national level, and now her boyfriend has betrayed her trust on a deeply personal authoritarian level. It essentially proves all of her worst youthful paranoia completely right.
And in the fallout of that, she realizes something about Martin. She realizes that Martin, the weird, quiet guy who always hangs around her dad, actually sees right through her family's nonsense. He knows they are fake.
So they form this incredibly unlikely alliance. You have the disgruntled middle-aged outsider and the rebellious, heartbroken teenage daughter. They become this weird little heist team.
Because Cosima is the one who gives Martin the weapon he needs to take Ben down.
She gives him the keys to the castle. Specifically, she gives Martin the password to a hidden drafts folder in an old email account.
And inside that drafts folder,
The police reports.
Yeah.
The actual suppressed documentation about Fliss's rape by Andrew Jarvis and the details of the cover-up orchestrated by Ben.
It is the ultimate smoking gun. Which brings us right into Section 4, the takedown, and the massive twist that follows. Martin finally has the proof. He has the receipts for both the covered-up rape and the Cambridge car crash.
So Martin executes his plan. He takes all of this incredibly damning information, and he goes straight to Richard Take.
And Richard Take is Ben's biggest political rival within his own party.
Exactly. Martin hands over the files, and he just sits back thinking, this is it. I have done it. I am finally going to destroy Ben Fitzmaurice.
He is so gleeful about it. He goes home, he turns on the news, and he is just waiting for the breaking news banner. He wants to watch Ben crumble on live television. He wants Ben to experience the exact same public humiliation and exile that Martin has felt his whole life. He wants Ben to be the one pressing his nose against the glass for once.
But Martin fundamentally misunderstands how the elite system actually works. He forgets the #1 rule of this class.
The system always protects its own.
Exactly. Martin thinks he's playing some brilliant game of 4G chess, but Ben literally owns the board they are playing on.
So the news finally breaks. What actually happens?
Well, half of Martin's plan works. The press absolutely destroys Andrew Jarvis. The story comes out, the police reopen the investigation, Jarvis is arrested, his reputation is completely ruined.
He becomes the ultimate scapegoat.
He does, and rightly so, because he is a literal monster who assaulted Fliss. But the other half of the plan, Ben.
The guy who actively covered up the rape and protected the monster?
Ben completely survives.
It is infuriating to read. How does he survive?
He spins the narrative with terrifying efficiency. He immediately goes in front of the cameras and claims he had absolutely no idea. He claims he was completely misled and manipulated by his trusted friend Jarvis. He performs this incredible act of public shock and horror.
He cuts Jarvis loose instantly.
Instantly. He gives an interview where he says, "He is dead to me now."
He essentially amputates the infected limb to save the main body. He sacrifices his oldest friend and financial backer without a second thought to save his own political career.
And the public completely buys it. They see him as a betrayed friend, not a co-conspirator. And then comes the absolute twist of the knife, the moment that really defines the entire book. Once the dust settles a bit, Ben confronts Martin privately.
And Martin goes into this meeting fully expecting rage. He is bracing himself for Ben to scream at him, to threaten him, to officially exile him forever.
But Ben doesn't do any of that. Ben looks at the man who just leaked his darkest family secrets to his political rival, and Ben apologizes.
He actually apologizes.
He does. He sincerely thanks Martin. He says to him, "Thank you for opening my eyes to Jarvis's toxicity. I was blind and you showed me the truth." He entirely reframes Martin's horrific act of betrayal as a profound act of tough love. He calls it an act of true friendship.
That is just. It is diabolical. It is psychological warfare.
It is an absolute masterstroke of manipulation. It is weaponized empathy. Because by accepting Martin back into the fold and forgiving him, Ben completely neutralizes the threat Martin poses.
Oh, I see. Because if he fights Martin, Martin stays angry.
Right. If Ben declares war, Martin remains a bitter enemy who still knows where all the other bodies are buried. But if Ben forgives him, if Ben embraces him, Martin becomes his loyal pet all over again. Ben literally tells him in that scene, "You are one of us."
One of us. When you say it in that context, it doesn't sound like a welcoming hug. It sounds like a threat.
Because it is a threat, it means you are safe from my wrath, but you are now completely owned by me. You are officially complicit in everything I have done because you accepted my forgiveness.
Which brings us to Section 5. The hollow victory. Because on paper, Martin got exactly what he originally wanted, right? He is back in the inner circle.
He is fully reintegrated. The book shows him attending another fancy dinner, and this time he is given the seat of honor. He is seated right at the right hand of the hostess. He has finally arrived.
He even has a very acceptable new life setup. He has a new partner, Alexander, who is a wealthy banker.
Highly respectable.
Very acceptable to the Fitzmaurice crowd. Martin is finally playing by the exact rules of wealthy, upper-class, gay domesticity that they approve of.
But the tragedy is, Martin admits to us that he feels completely empty.
Because his entire identity was wrapped up in his anger.
Yes. He spent decades defining himself solely by his resentment and his hatred of Ben. He fueled his entire life with the desire to expose them. And now, without that hatred, without that struggle against the glass, he realizes he is just a boring, middle-aged man reading hardback books by a swimming pool.
He actually misses the hunger of being on the outside.
He does. He realizes the fight was the only thing giving him a real pulse.
And that leads us to the final scene of the book. And this is where the cynicism of this world really just hits you like a ton of bricks. It is 18 months later. Martin and his banker partner, Alexander, are lounging by a beautiful hotel pool on holiday.
Right. And politically, Ben has succeeded. He's either the prime minister now or incredibly close to it. He's survived the scandal entirely.
And as Martin is sitting there in his luxury, who walks into the pool area?
Andrew Jarvis.
The Andrew Jarvis.
Yeah.
The rapist, the man Ben publicly said was dead to him, the ultimate scapegoat.
He just strolls right toward them by the pool.
So what does that imply? What is the author telling us here?
It implies that in this specific social strata, Even the designated scapegoat eventually finds his way back in. The circle always closes. The wealthy will always protect each other in the end. It tells us that no one is truly exiled forever as long as they have enough money and enough shared history.
So Ben cutting him loose.
It was just a temporary PR move to win an election. Privately, behind closed doors, they are clearly back in business together. The exile was just for the cameras.
And how does Martin react? Does he stand up? Does he scream at this man who destroyed Fliss? Does he grab Alexander and say, "We are leaving right now, get away from us"?
No, he doesn't do any of that. The text strongly implies that Martin just sits there and orders another drink. The little shadow remains exactly that, a shadow.
He just accepts it.
He accepts it because the sheer comfort of being inside the circle is ultimately more powerful to him than his own moral outrage. He chooses the velvet rope over justice for Fliss.
That is unbelievably bleak.
It is devastating. It is a profound statement on how comfort and proximity to power absolutely corrupts the human soul.
So let's pull all of this together and look at the broader themes here in Section 6, because Elizabeth Day is saying so much about class and permissibility.
One of the things she captures perfectly is the distinct difference between misbehavior and eccentricity.
Yes, that double standard is everywhere in this book. If a group of working-class teenagers smash up a pub, it is a riot. It is criminal damage.
Exactly. But if Ben Fitzmaurice and his wealthy friends destroy a restaurant dining room at Cambridge, it is just high spirits. It is a funny anecdote for a dinner party, and Ben's father just quietly writes a large check to the restaurant owner the next day to make it go away.
The elite in this world do not actually solve problems or face consequences. They just manage PR.
That is the core thesis of Ben's entire existence. He doesn't fix things. He smooths them over with cash and charm.
And then we have to look at the theme of truth, the nature of truth in this story, because Martin tells us right away he is a hall of mirrors.
Which forces us, the reader, to constantly ask, is Martin actually evil? Or is he simply the logical product of a lifetime of Ben's emotional abuse?
He is definitely not a perfect, innocent victim. He is deeply snobbish, he is deceitful, he is selfish.
But he is also the only person actually telling us the story. He is our only window into this world. And the way truth is handled in the book is so modern. Think about the drafts folder.
Right, Cosima giving him the password.
It is such a brilliant modern detail. The public speeches Ben gives are completely full of lies. The actual undeniable truth of their lives is hiding in a digital drafts folder in an email account that was never actually sent.
It really speaks to how carefully we all curate our public lives versus the messy, dangerous reality that we are too terrified to ever hit send on. It is like the digital subconscious of the family.
Absolutely. And speaking of Cosima, we have to touch on the generational conflict theme, Cosima versus Ben and Serena.
It is the ultimate Gen Z versus Boomer or Gen X showdown. Cosima is out there demanding absolute accountability. She cares deeply about the climate crisis. She cares about social justice. She wants to tear the system down. While her parents, Ben and Serena, care entirely about optics, preserving their wealth, and self-preservation.
But Day doesn't let Cosima off the hook either. Because even Cosima eventually retreats, doesn't she?
She does. When the whole situation with the undercover cop boyfriend gets too real and too dangerous, where does she run to?
She goes right back to Tipworth. She retreats to the massive, heavily gated family estate in the country.
Because the gravity of that privilege is almost impossible to escape.
It is like a black hole. Even if you ideologically hate it, it pulls you back in because it is undeniably safe, it is warm, it is where the resources are. The book makes the point that it's incredibly hard to remain a dedicated revolutionary when you are cold, broke, and heartbroken, and your parents have a heated swimming pool and a private chef waiting for you.
It is a really pragmatic, cynical view of youth activism among the elite. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I am left constantly thinking about that title, One of Us.
It is the ultimate double-edged sword.
Because you have to ask yourself, is it an invitation or is it a threat?
I think the book concludes that it is entirely both. If you are one of us, you are fully protected from the outside world. You can get away with literal manslaughter, like Ben did in Cambridge. You can cover up a horrific assault. You can fail upwards into the highest levels of government.
But the admission price for that protection is your own soul.
Exactly. You have to be complicit. You have to shut your mouth about the terrible things you see happening around you. You have to swallow the truth and smile through the kitchen suppers.
Martin got exactly what he wanted his entire life. He wanted to be accepted by Ben. He wanted to be inside the room.
But to stay in the room, he had to completely lose the memory of the only person who was ever actually kind to him. Fliss?
He effectively sided with the exact people who drove her to her death, just so he could sit by a luxury pool and drink very expensive wine.
It is a devastating compromise.
It really is, and that is the provocative thought we want to leave you with today. When Andrew Jarmus walks back to that hotel pool at the very end of the novel, the circle is fully complete. The elite system has healed its own wounds, and Martin Gilmore is no longer an outsider looking in.
No, he is just another functioning part of the machinery now.
He is just a cog, a very comfortable, very well-dressed cog, but a cog nonetheless. He has surrendered everything that made him human just to cast a shadow.
It is a brilliant, terrifying character study.
It truly is.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into One of Us. It is definitely a book that will make you look at your next supper invitation just a little bit differently.
And it will definitely make you check exactly who is casting the shadow next to you.
Absolutely. See you next time.